Hey folks, Tim Newman with Soft Light Studios coming to you once again from Columbus, Ohio. You know, following up on yesterday's tutorial, I have another tutorial today that involves using both the single row and the single column marquee tools. Now what we're going to do with this tutorial today is we're going to create a really cool pixel stretched faded photo frame in Photoshop. I think you really like this effect, and you'll find once you put this tutorial together, you'll have a template that you can use over and over again on new pictures as you add them in. Take a look. This is the photo that we're going to use here for our exercise, and we're going to turn this into what I think is going to be a pretty cool 16 by 20 portrait with a neat frame around it that we're building up here in Photoshop. In order to get started, we just simply need to create ourselves a new document. That would be the File New command up here, Command N on a Mac, Control N on Windows. And what I would like is a document that's 16 inches in width, 20 inches in height, 300 pixels per inch is a great resolution for print. RGB color mode is fine, and that 16-bit depth is fine. A transparent background will be just fine for this document, and ProPhoto RGB as my typical color profile that I work in. So let's go ahead and click on Create and create that document. So now the first thing that we want to do here is we want to create ourselves some guides that we're going to use in using the single column and single row marquee tools in stretching out pixels on the image and building up our frame around the outside of this document. So we're going to come up here to View, New Guide Layout, and I don't need any columns and I don't need any rows for this, so I'll turn those off. Margins at 2 inches all the way around sound great for this document, and we'll leave Clear Existing Guides turned on. So there we go, there's our first set of guides. Now I want a set of guides around the outside of the document too, so I can use those for snapping to when I'm making some selections. And again, a View, New Guide Layout for that. This time we're just going to take our margin and we're going to go with 0 all the way around. And you'll see that gives us margin lines around the outside. And if I turn off this Clear Existing Guides, it leaves my margins that I had on the inside. So let's click on OK. And I think that looks great. That's what we want. Let's do a Command 0 on the Mac, Control 0 on Windows to make this fit full screen. And now let's go over and get our picture and bring it in. So we're going to go over to this engagement picture image. We're going to come over here to the one and only layer strip that's on this document, and we're going to click on that layer strip and start dragging it across, and we're going to come up here to this Untitled 2 tab and hover over it. You can see that makes that document active. I want to hold down the Shift key because that's going to nicely center the image when I let go with the mouse first. And of course we're going to get this resizing dialog box because they're not exactly the same depth. That's fine. Let's go ahead and paste that in there. Now that that's in there, I think I'd like to resize it, and obviously my guides are already in place to do that, so I'm going to hit the V key to bring up the Move tool. You notice that that's the Move tool right there. You can tell by the 4-sided arrow. If I hit the V key and my icon looks like that, that's the artboard tool, and I don't want that. So V key again to make sure I've got the Move tool. You might have to do a Shift with your tool keys, like Shift V over and over again to get to the right tool. If you find that you have to do the Shift key and you don't like that, go into Photoshop Preferences and turn off the option Use Shift key for tool switch, and that'll make that Shift key go away. All right, I'm going to come up here to the upper right-hand corner. I'm going to click and I'm going to start dragging, and as you may or may not recall by now, anytime that you do a Move tool transform, it's locked to aspect ratio unless you hold down the Shift key, and then you'll notice you are free to size at will. If I also add in to the Shift key the Option key on the Mac or the Alt key on Windows, you notice that it comes in uniformly from both sides, both edges, or both corners, whichever way that you're moving from. In this case, both of our corners. And there we go. I've snapped that to the guide right here in the upper right-hand corner, and of course the lower left-hand corner is doing the same thing. So if I let go of the mouse first, modifier key second, That's sized just the way I want it to be. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit the return key or the enter key, and that will commit that change. Now, if you followed me for any length of time at all, you know that pretty much any time I do a free transform or I do a move resize, I hit the A key to go to the direct selection tool. Not that I need that tool next, I just like having the transform control frame turned off and out of the way so I don't have to look at it. Now, we're going to start using our single column and single row marquee tools to add this effect into the photo that we want to add in. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the single column marquee tool first, and if we hit the M key, you notice that makes the, in my case, the rectangular marquee tool active. There's the elliptical marquee tool with another press of the M key. There is the single row marquee tool. One more time, there's the single column marquee tool, and that's just hitting the M key over and over again. If you don't get to the column and row marquee tools, either using the M key or the Shift M key, come over here to this flyout, click on this, and confirm that they are indeed loaded in your toolbar and that they have the M keys assigned as a shortcut key to this. If you see them here but no letter M here, that means you have to come over and pick them manually. If you don't see them here at all, that means they haven't been added into the toolbar, and if you go into Edit Toolbar, you can easily do that. So back to the single column marquee tool. I'm going to click anywhere here on this guideline, and I am going to add in a single column marquee. Very difficult to see at the moment because it is only 1 pixel wide. I'm going to come down here to right about the middle of the image, and I'm going to start zooming in, and I'm going to stay on the middle of that image. And at some point, you will notice here that you're starting to see the marching ants of the selection tool. The other thing I want you to take a look at, and I'm going to hide my face here for a minute, is over here in the navigator. This frame will help you move around quickly and get from top to bottom to middle, etc., which is definitely going to be handy in this project that we're working on here. So remember that that navigator will be hiding, hello, underneath my face, and if you go and look at that in your own version of Photoshop, you can quickly see that. So we want to be right here in the middle, and I'm going to keep zooming in, and as I can zoom in quite a bit here, I can now really confirm. In fact, if I go way in here, now I'm right here at 12,800%. You can see that this is indeed a single pixel. Now, I don't know that I need to be zoomed in that much. I think somewhere around 1200, 800 is just about fine, maybe even one less than that. With this single column marquee tool active, I want you to do a Command T on the Mac. That's a Control T on Windows. You'll notice that even though it's a little bit subtle, we now have a move/resize frame around it. It's that real light blue that you're seeing. And the best way to find this and confirm that you have that is to look at the middle of the document right here in the center. And you might have to scroll up and down to find this, but right here, those are our transform control handles that we would normally see on a transform frame. And what we want to do is we want to grab the handle on the left-hand side here, and we want to start to drag this outward. And at some point as you're dragging it outward, it's going to act like it's locking up on you and freezing. You can't go any further than that. And that's because of that aspect ratio constrained resize. If you hold down the Shift key, that will unlock that, and eventually you'll be able to work your way out here to the right-hand edge. Now, I'm going to turn off my ugly mug one more time here, and if you look at the navigator panel here, you can see that indeed that edge is pulled all the way out here to the left-hand edge. So make sure you confirm that on your Photoshop screen and don't get distracted by my face covering up the navigator here in the tutorial. And I'll come back up here for a second. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to go ahead and hit return to commit that change. You can see our marching ants came back, which we don't need anymore. So we're going to do a Command D on the Mac, Control D on Windows, and we'll do a Command 0 on the Mac, Control 0 on Windows to size this down to fit the frame again. So you can see what it did. The tool here took these pixels and it stretched them out, which I think is pretty cool. Now we're going to do the same thing on the other side. The single column marquee tool is still active, so we're just going to click on this guideline over here. And again, we want to zoom in pretty close to the center here. And if I turn my face off for a second, you can see that we can take this red move tool here in the navigator and much easier move around. Now, as I move in here, because of where my guide was at, my single column marquee selection wasn't over the last row of pixels in the picture, and that would be bad. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back over one. Now we're in the right place, right? And now we're going to do that Command T on the Mac, Control T on Windows, and you can see there is my resize handle right there. I'm going to start dragging that out again. Before too long, there I am. I'm getting that kind of locked in stop based on the aspect ratio. Remember to hold that shift key down and stretch that out. And because I'm still off screen here, you can really see how that's showing up in the navigator panel. Once you have that over to that side like that, go ahead and hit the return key or the enter key. Again, you'll flip back to the marching ants, do the Command D on the Mac, Control D on Windows to make those go away, and then do that Command 0 on the Mac or Control 0 on Windows to resize that to fit into the screen. So now we've taken that picture and we've nicely stretched out the left and right sides on that and kind of given that real cool pixel blur to that. Now we're going to switch over to the single row marquee tool, and we can do that by coming over here and clicking on this flyout, and there we have it there. Or the other way, I'm going to go back to the single column for a second. If I hit the M key 3 times, there it is. Now I'm going to click up here on this guide, and that should give me a single row marquee across there. And once again, hard to see because it's so small. We're going to do our zoom in thing here until we can confirm where it is and also confirm that it is indeed over the last pixels in that picture. Again, that Command T on the Mac, Control T on Windows. You see over here on mine, I've got my move handles right here. Just make sure that you move around until you find the center. Grab the outside move handle, the one on top, and start dragging out. You can see it happening immediately. And don't forget, you're going to have to hold down that shift key to unlock it. And then you want to go up here to that top edge. I'll hop off screen here for a second. And there you can see it. We've got pretty good confirmation that we're on this outside edge here on this image. With that size that way, go ahead and hit the return or enter key, commit that. Let's do that Command D or Control D to make that go away. So now we've stretched out our third side. Let's do a Command 0 on the Mac, Control 0 on Windows. And that takes us back to fitting into the screen. One more time, we want to do that to the bottom. So we have stretched out from all 4 sides in this picture. So that is still the single row marquee tool, which is already active. Come down here, click on this guideline. Again, somewhere roughly in the center, start zooming in until you can see the marquee drawing around there are marching ants. And just like the one on the right hand side, we're off by 1 pixel here. Zoom in a little more so you can see that. Just use the up arrow key this time, up cursor key, and make sure that, like we are here, you're covering up that last row of pixels in the image. And then we're going to do that Command T on the Mac, Control T on Windows. There you can see last time our sizing handle. I'm going to hop back off screen here for a second. I'm going to take the bottom handle here of the 2 handles and start dragging this down. And as I run into that location where it kind of seems like it's hanging up and won't go any further, I hold down the shift key and keep stretching out. I am both looking at the screen and watching the navigator screen for when I'm at the bottom, and I can see looking at our document, I'm definitely at the bottom, and the navigator screen confirms that. So I'll go ahead and let go there. At this point, I need to do my last return here. I'm going to do that Command D, Control D to get rid of the marching ants. And then I'm going to do a Command 0 on the Mac, Control 0 on Windows to make that fit in the screen. So there we go. We now have our image pretty nicely stretched out in all 4 directions. One of the things that you may have noticed at this point is that when we stretch these pixels out it also imparts a little bit of transparency to them. And you might think that that's coming from the transparency layer below. It indeed is not. The actual process of stretching the pixels creates a little bit of transparency there that we want to get rid of. So what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this layer. And you can see as soon as we duplicate this layer, that transparency goes away. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to do a Command E on the Mac. That's a Control E on Windows. And you can see now we've got that really nice pixel stretch effect, and we've gotten rid of that transparency that was put into it by the stretching process. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and blur this a little bit, not the picture itself, but the pixel edge effect around the outside edges, because I think that just softens it up a bit. Now the easiest way to do this is to make a copy of our picture right now. In fact, let's rename this layer 2 to image, right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a Command J on the Mac. That's a Control J on Windows. You can see we have this now called image copy. We're going to rename this, and we're going to call this blurred edges, right? And the easiest way to do this is to create a mask. That way you can come back and re-blur that edge anytime you want and not worry about the picture in the center. It'll stay the way it is. And the best mask to create here for this is a mask that protects the interior but allows us just to have the blur effect applied to the unmasked edges. Quickest way to do that, let's grab the rectangular marquee tool, which is me hitting the M key a couple times. There we go. And I'm going to start at the upper left of this inside set of guides, go to the lower right of the inside set of guides, and now I have an active selection. That active selection is currently of the picture interior itself, and what I want is the exterior, or the border, if you will, here. And that's just as simple as inverting this selection. A couple ways to do that. One, come up here and do a select inverse. Or if you remember the shortcut keys, that's a Shift Command I on the Mac, Shift Control I on Windows. And you note, as soon as I do that, the marching ants in the middle are still there, but we also have marching ants around the outside, indicating that this is part of the selection and this is not. And here's an interesting little trick for you. You watch my cursor moving around here. Right here I got these crosshairs, which means I would be drawing a new marquee tool, or a new marquee selection. You notice as soon as I transfer over to the interior of a selection, I get that different cursor, which is the arrow with the dashed rectangle underneath it, and that indicates to you that you are inside a selection and now you are outside a selection. Pretty straightforward. What we're going to do now that we have this selection active is we are going to come down here and click on the Create Layer Mask icon, and that adds that mask to that picture. Now it's not doing anything yet, but it will in a second. And what it's going to do here in a second is we're going to come up here and click on the filter choice up here in the menu. We're going to come down here to blur, and we're getting ready to do a lens blur. But right before we do that, I noticed something that I catch myself doing periodically, and you may do too. I actually have the mask active, not the image. See this white frame here? So we have the wrong thing active. If we do a blur right now, we'll be blurring that mask, which we don't want to do. So we're going to just click anywhere on the picture here. We're going to come over here into this layer strip and click on the mask image, or the actual picture image here. So that's now active. See the white frame transferred around it. Now come up here to filter, go in here and do blur and lens blur. So the lens blur panel comes up here, and you can see it's blurring everything. Don't let that worry you, because the mask is going to protect that interior, even though it looks like it's blurred here. So let's come up with a pretty heavy duty blur here. We'll really blur this up, and you can see that picture's getting really, really soft. I kind of like that. There we go. That's a really nice soft blur. Now watch what happens. We're going to click on OK up here. That will take us out of this. We end up back in the picture, and you can see the center is not blurred, but that pixel stretch is blurred pretty nicely. And I can confirm that if I come over here to the mask and I hover right over it. You see the hand icon I'm getting here? And if I hold down the Shift key and click on that, I just disabled the mask. So you can see the area that's getting blurred versus the area that's not getting blurred. And that's what that mask is doing for us there. What's really nice is from now on, we can come in here and do anything we want to this picture, and that mask will protect the center for us. So that's a pretty cool way of using masks there. All right, we're going to finish this off by putting a kind of frame around the outside edge of it. And one of the things I like to do when I put frames around the outsides of pictures in Photoshop, rather than just making it a rectangular frame, I like it to look like it's a mitered frame made out of 4 pieces. And that sounds complicated, but it's really pretty straightforward. So watch how we do this. We are going to grab the polygonal lasso tool. And you see that's the regular lasso tool. That is the polygonal lasso tool. And then, of course, there's the magnetic lasso tool. So those 3 live together there. But the polygonal lasso tool is the one we want. And that's the L key, is the shortcut key for going through and selecting those tools. Now, the polygonal lasso tool does a couple of things. One is it draws polygons that ultimately have to be closed paths, and it does it in straight line segments. That's pretty neat. The other thing that it does is anytime it sees guides, it will snap to those guides, which makes it the perfect tool for doing what we want to do here. So in order to make our first edge of our mitered frame, I'll decide that we're going to work over here on this right-hand side. I'm just going to click right here at this intersection, and it will snap to that intersection without any problem. And then I'm going to come up here to this upper right-hand intersection at the outside, click there again, and it snaps to that. And you can see, as I'm going from intersection to intersection, it immediately snaps in all those places. So we've gone down to the lower right-hand side, and you can see now we're coming up to the inner right-hand side at the bottom. And then we're going to work our way back to where we started. And you notice as soon as we get back there, see that little circle that's showing up underneath the polygonal lasso tool icon? That circle indicates to you that it's about to complete this polygon. So we'll click on that. There you see a nice set of marching ants. I'm going to create a new layer over here with the create new layer icon. And then while this selection is active, I'm going to come over here and click on the create layer mask icon down here. So you can see now we have a new layer mask here. And if you look at that layer mask over here and you look very carefully, you can see that, yeah, it's got that little mitered piece as blocked out in white here. So the rest of that area is masked, and just this white area is the area that's going to be allowed to show through or have any effect applied to it. Now we could come in and apply our effect here now, but let's go ahead and finish all of our miter pieces first. So let's work on our next one, and we'll just click here at this upper right inner intersection. Then we're going to go over here to the upper left inner intersection, click there. We're going to the outside upper left, clicking there, all the way across the top to the upper right outside intersection, and then back into where we started. So we're creating a nice little mitered frame piece there. You can see that's the selection you should have immediately. Let's go ahead and create a new layer there. And we're going to add a layer mask to that layer using our create layer mask icon. And now you can see we have a new mask on a new layer, but our mitered frame piece is now on the top of this one. Let's continue on. We'll come over here and click on this upper left inner intersection, and we'll come down here to the lower left inner intersection and click there. Come out here to the corner, that's our lower left outer intersection, and click there. Now we drag all the way up to the top up here. So this would be our upper left outer intersection. And then we come back here to where we started. And you can see we're getting our little closing polygon symbol there, a little round symbol there. Click on that. There is mitered frame piece number 3. Again, click on add a new layer here in the layers control panel. And with that selection still active, click on add layer mask. And now you see we have our left mitered frame piece ready to go. One to finish this up. And by now, it doesn't really matter where you start. You probably figured that out. So I'm just going to click here, go from there to there. That gives me my interior section of my rail. I'm going to this outside corner down here, all the way across the bottom to the outside corner on the left. And then I'm coming into where I started at my section here on the inside of that lower left, and click on that. There we go. We have our last selection in place. Let's create one more new layer. And with that selection still active, let's click on the Create New Layer Mask icon, and there you go. There are our 4 mitered frame pieces. And I'm just going to rename these real quick. So I'm going to double click on Layer 2 here, and I'm going to call this the right frame rail, right? And this one can be the top frame rail. This one can be the left frame rail. And this one here, bottom frame rail. Hard to believe, but we're almost done here. We got one last thing to do, which I think will be pretty cool when you see it and give you a real neat idea of how to use this gradient tool. So I'm going to hit the G key. So you can see first I get the paint bucket tool. I'm going to hit the G key again. That's a different paint bucket tool. This one is the 3D material drop tool. And if you do any 3D work, you'll get used to what that is. Hit the G key one more time. There is the gradient tool. Now, as far as a gradient goes, what I would like to do is I would like the gradient to be transparent here and go to darker to the outside edge. It effectively making that blurred, stretched pixel look fade away to the edge of the picture. And in order to do that, what I need to do is come up here to the gradient drop-down box right here. I want to open up the basics one. And the one I want here is the one that's in the middle, and that's foreground to transparent, right? So that's the selection I want there. So I'm going to click on that to make it active, and then I'm going to hit the Return or Enter key. And that's currently foreground to transparent. Getting ready to draw these gradients for our frame here requires that we check some things with the gradient tool, because if you don't check them, then you can get some really unexpected results. You notice I came up here and I clicked on this one right here, which is foreground to transparent. That's the gradient that I want, and it said it took it, but when I hit Return or Enter, you'll notice that we don't see that there, and that's this pesky little toggle box right here, which turns transparency off. And as soon as you turn that checkbox on, you'll notice, there's my transparency there along with starting to black. So that's cool. I want to basically draw from here to here, or from here to here, here to here, here to here, basically on all 4 of these, inside to outside, to get this gradient to go the direction I want it to go. Now, if I draw from the outside to the inside, then the gradient is going to start at its starting position and go all the way across the frame. Going from here to outside, it allows the gradient to start drawing here and then cuts it off right here. Whatever transition it's going to make happens in that space, which is exactly what we want. We don't want anything happening in the interior of the frame, even though it's masked, because what we want to do is we want to control the width of the gradient all the way around on all 4 edges to have it be uniform. So the first thing I notice is we're starting at black and we're going to transparent if we're drawing in the normal direction, which we are at this point. If I click on reverse, you'll notice we go from transparent to black, which is exactly what we said we wanted. We want to be transparent on the inside and work our way to black on the outside. Now, every time we get ready to draw one of these gradients, we have to make sure that we draw it on the correct layer with the correct mask. So if we're going to draw this one here from inside to outside, that's our right frame rail. We want to make sure that we draw it on the right frame rail, right frame rail layer. It's like Sally sells seashells by the seashore. So I'm now, with that being active, with the layer contents being the active portion of the layer, not the mask. See how that white box is in the appropriate place right here? I am going to start on this guide right here and use that as my snap point. And I'm going to hold down, you notice I can go any direction I want with this gradient. I don't want to do that. I'm going to hold down the Shift key to force that to be straight, and I'm going to this guide here. And then see how it works from transparent to black on the outside? That's exactly what we wanted. Now we're going to do the top frame rail next, so we got to make that layer active, make sure that the layer contents is the active portion of the layer, and then we're going to come up here and we're going to draw from this guide up. Again, shift key to force this to stay straight. That looks good. Look at our nice intersection there in our mitered frame. Let's go to our left frame rail and make sure we have the contents portion of that layer active. Let's start here and drag out straight with the shift key. Nice frame rail there. And then last but not least, our bottom frame rail. Make sure again that the layer contents portion is active, not the mask. And then start on this guideline, hold down the shift key and go to this guideline, forcing it straight with shift key. There you go. There is our frame rail around all four sides. Let's go ahead and turn off the guides with the command semicolon on the Mac, control semicolon on Windows. And there you have it, a pretty cool frame around this picture. Now, the one thing that you might potentially do, and that's really up to you on this, is when you make these masks for the right, top, left, and bottom frame rails, notice there's just a tiny bit of a space here. And I kind of like that space because it kind of reinforces the notion of this being a mitered frame. You might, when you're making that polygonal lasso tool selection, right before you turn it into a mask, you could go up here to select, and you would go here to modify, and then one of the choices here would be expand, and you could expand that by 1 pixel, and then you wouldn't have the overlap. I kind of like this little cut here between the frames on this side. It makes it a little more dimensional. There you have it. I think that's way cool and is working pretty well, unlike my little switcher over here, which is not. So I guess we'll go to the ending comments in a separate clip. Well, there you have it, my tutorial on using the single row and single column marquee tools in Photoshop to use what I think is a pretty neat looking picture frame. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial and you'll find it useful now and in the future. And if nothing else, it kept you socially isolated just a little bit longer. Hope you're staying home, staying safe, and staying healthy. Remember, as we always say, learning equals skills. Practice equals mastery. We'll see you out there. Good night.